If you are experiencing foundation issues, get a free estimate from Ox Foundations.
And Mark Ledbetter, the president of the Greater Coosa Valley Area Ministerial Association, joins us this morning. Mark, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. And we did just 7 or 8 state news stories, and all of them violent. And if we ever need prayer, we need it, don't we?
We do. It's perilous times. I think the Apostle Paul, he may have had this day and time in mind. At least we can fit what he taught about the perilous times, fierce times within our scenario today. It's just, it's amazing all that's taken place, the violence and the angry rhetoric that we're hearing and the accusations and the finger pointing. It's just a tough time for Americans.
I talked to somebody just a few days ago and was talking about prayer. He said, prayer don't work. How would you respond to that?
Well, they apparently haven't talked to the right people, for one thing, because I know prayer does work. I've seen prayer work in my own life. I've seen it work in the prayer group that we have. We've had people have jobs. We've come to them, opened up for them. We've had people healed. We have, name a lot of things. I do know that part of our problems today in our nation is that we didn't take the Apostle Paul's admonition in 1 Timothy 2 about praying for authority over us so that we can have a peaceful life.
And that's what this is about.
And this is what this is about, the National Day of Prayer. Sure is.
What's going to be happening on Thursday?
Thursday we have there'll be, of course, introduction, let everybody who comes to the flagpole at noon Thursday to come out. We'll have our mayor will be there with the proclamation and the pledge. Then we have several or 5 different emphases for prayer. We have different individuals coming to help us with prayer. First responders, military, Glenn Winter, the chaplain at Coosa Valley Medical. He's also has been a military chaplain himself. And then we find that for education, the associate pastor at First Assembly, Vern Ogle, will be with us, and he'll lead us in prayer. And then for our city government, one of our city council members, Reverend Donnie Blackman, will be leading us in prayer for our city. And then for our economic development community, Pastor Oak Grove First Baptist Church, Max Buttram, will be there for us. And then for the area church associate pastor at Rising Star, Gregory Patterson, will be praying. And then we're going to have a rendition of God Bless America with David Simpkins from First Methodist Church. And then we'll close out with the Lord's Prayer. And so that's it in a nutshell. We're having it at noon, convenient flagpole. Come during your lunch hour. We're not going to hold people long because we try to be cognizant of people's responsibilities, and but it's just a forum in which we give people in our community to come down and let us come together and express our prayer. This year's theme nationally is love one another. And I think that's very appropriate, as we've discussed from the beginning, that to love one another is a commandment that Jesus said, and by this all men will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. And so that's the prayer emphasis nationally. And then, of course, they have their own, nationally there are certain things they're calling for. God's blessings on the United States, on America. They're praying for us to love one another, especially we as Christians, we in the church. We should be demonstrating that love for another and showing the way to love. And then we have the pray, as I said in 1 Timothy, pray for their spheres of influence, particularly our government and the government agencies. And then also, and this would be my heart's desire, is in some way that this can be not just an annual event, but this would spearhead a spiritual movement, an awakening, a revival, whatever terminology you want to use, that there be a consciousness among Christians and believers in the churches to indeed take this admonishment that we are to love one another, and prayer for our nation should be a priority. It's not something we stick on the side, because when Paul wrote these words in 1 Timothy, he said this is, first of all, you should be praying for authorities. So it's a priority with him. And interesting is you read that down, he says that we may live a peaceful and tranquil life. So the absence of peace and tranquility could be a direct response to the result of us not praying like we should for our nation. And this goes all the way back to Jeremiah when the Israel was in exile. He said, settle down, have your children, and you pray for the welfare or the peace of your host, the Babylonians. So this has been a part of God's heart from even for Israel on through today. It's for us as believers who hold God and reverence Him to concern ourselves with things that concern Him. And obviously, we know that in Romans 13, that government is established by God. We as believers, according to Paul and Peter, should be subjected to authorities over us. And we have a responsibility in that subjection to pray for them, to look to them and let them know that we're supporting them spiritually, praying for wisdom. They are the stewards of our resources, so we certainly want them to have godly wisdom in the ministering of our resources.
Now, this started, back in 52 or something?
It's been as long as you and I. 1952, it was first introduced as part of public law, and it was first observed on Sunday, on Sundays in local churches primarily, even though the government said, okay, yeah, this is great. It wasn't until the 70s it began to take track, and then we find that it was in 1987, Strom Thurmond introduced legislation which amended the first public law, and Ronald Reagan signed it, declaring the first Thursday in May to be the National Day of Prayer. And then Bill Clinton signed a proclamation declaring that the president shall give a proclamation for that day of prayer. And of course, that's been challenged in a couple of places in a couple of states, but after they took it to court, the court sided in favor of the National Day of Prayer because it is for those who believe in the God of the Bible.
You talk about praying for those in leadership, praying for our government, praying for our military and education and economic development in area churches. In Jesus' day, a lot of the government didn't like him. Today, a lot of the government, we be honest about it, they don't like Christianity. They don't want you praying.
No,
and really a lot in leadership positions don't want your prayers.
Well, that seems to be a trend that has developed in the last decade, 2 decades really. It's been kind of subtle, but now it's out there in the forefront. They're very adamant about the absence or the lack or the diminishing the influence of the church and Christians. So they don't want it. They think that they don't need God. They don't need prayer. They can do it themselves. They can do it like Elvis Presley. They're going to do it their way. I think Frank Sinatra's thinking of that too. But anyway, that kind of attitude undermines even the foundation for our nation. That I had someone say, in fact, it was Rhonda said, I think the forefathers wouldn't recognize our nation today because they were advocates of freedom of religion. They prayed. They're the ones who instituted as part of their procedures in Congress, have a chaplain, and they open every day with prayer. And over the Supreme Court, it's got the Ten Commandments, and we find that they rely on it. They've supported it. People don't like it, but you can't take away the First Amendment. And that is freedom of religious expression. The government doesn't endorse a particular church, but they do recognize the value of religious practices and people having a higher authority as far as morality and ethics.
Thursday, high noon, over at the municipal complex.
Flagpole.
And starts at noon, what, 30 minutes maybe?
Probably 30. We try to, like I said, take into consideration the day of time and people's other responsibilities in the community.
Looks like it's going to be a pretty day, so
yes.
Hope a lot of people will come out and be a part of that.
Invite you all to come be a part.
And finally this morning, Brother Mark, we as believers,
Yes.
we must be disciplined in praying for our country and for the leadership, because if we aren't careful, we can allow the bombardment of what we see and hear every day from social media to this, that, and the other. And if we aren't careful, our prayer life will suffer from it.
It will, because people will become discouraged, and people will be like the individual you referred to. The prayer doesn't work, and people ask, where's God in all this? When they do that, they judge God by human standards, not by the biblical standards. But if people pay attention, you know, Zig Ziglar, some people don't know who that is. He said, every morning I read the paper and the Bible because I want to see what God's up to.
That's good.
We need to be paying attention, but I'm what I call cautiously optimistic. I realize things are tough out there. If you want to know how tough they are, you need to ride along with some of our local police officers at night. I know that they're hard, I know they're difficult, but hey, God knows it too. And in the background, He is working. He's working things out according to His plan, His purposes. Therefore, we have nothing really to be fearful over, because it's in His hands. He has everything in control. We look at it like chaos. It's not happening. All this is going on, but it's all fitting in God's divine plan. And part of this anarchy, if I can go so far as to say, this anarchy is predicted by the Apostle Paul, by Jesus Himself. So, you know, it's all out there. So why should we as believers be up in arms and surprised that we're seeing these things? Paul told us the fierce days, peerless times, fierce days would come. Jesus said there will be a time when lawlessness is rampant, you know, and the love of many will grow cold because of it. But for we who believe and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, He's coming back. I'm looking forward to it. We must be loving, passionate, praying for His return, and be zealous of good deeds. We got to do the work, preparing people's heart for His return.
Be at National Day of Prayer on Thursday at the flagpole in Sylacauga. Brother Mark, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
More Daybreak after this.